back to this latest episode of Japan's top business interviews. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Story, president of Dale Carnegie Training, Tokyo, Japan. My special guest today is Jean-Phillpe Oulevey from Greenwings, who joins me. Thank you very much for joining me, Jean-Phillpe.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit about, how it is you're running. You've been running this company for quite a long time in Japan.
That's correct.
It's in the cut flower business coming from New Zealand, and I used to be in a little bit of that business even years ago. So I'm familiar a little bit with it, but a lot of people won't be. But tell us the journey. Why are you in Japan? Why are you running this Kiwi company? And how's it all going?
It's not a Kiwi company. It's a Dutch company.
A Dutch company. Okay, yes. my apologies.
But
right.
we do have an export business in New Zealand that we founded not so long ago.
Okay, that's what I'm thinking. Okay,
yes.
right.
So you have Greenwings New Zealand that is there for us as well, supplying us. Yes.
Yeah, because I was looking in your resume and it's got Greenwings New Zealand. I'm going, must be a New Zealand company. So how is it that you're here running this company in Japan then?
So I went to school in the United States just when really Japan was having this Japan business miracle, and a lot of the textbooks and a lot of the other foreign students, because being French, I was a foreign student in the US, were Japanese. So I got exposed to the Asian culture, to Japan in particular. And once I graduated in the United States, I decided that I wanted to go somewhere else and build up again my skills, my language skills, broaden my horizons. And Japan came a bit as a natural choice back then, at the end of mid-90s.
When you were studying in the States, which city, which university, where were you located?
I was in Northern Cal, not far away, basically across the bay from San Francisco.
All right, okay. And there were a lot of Japanese students at the university. That's interesting. That's interesting.
There were the Koreans and the Japanese. The Koreans as well were the biggest, basically, communities of foreign students.
Right, okay. And so after that, what happened?
So after that, I did work at, once you have a degree in the United States, you get 1 year of practical training, which I did at the Wells Fargo Bank. And then I sent resumes. I didn't get a job for the green card and all that. I did not want to use the French language skills to get by. That was not something that I was interested in. Maybe in retrospect, I don't regret it, but that would have been the easy way for me to stay in the US. And back then, I really wanted to stay. But I had to leave. So the choice went towards trying to make it happen in Japan. Sent resumes, got my hand on all the French subsidiaries and operating in Tokyo or in Japan. Sent a resumes, spontaneous resume. And I got one reply, and I got the job.
Oh, great!
They gave me a chance. It was
well done.
You get lucky here and there. I can't deny that I got lucky a couple of times. After that, getting lucky for 20-something years is another story. But sometimes you get lucky breaks, and that was definitely one of them.
So what was the job in Japan?
So the job was, back then there was a brand that still, I think, exists and operates in Japan called Lancel. They were a brand of luxury goods, consumer goods, handbags, wallets, bit of fashion. A Louis Vuitton, but never got to be a Louis Vuitton, but along these lines. And they had just decided to get out of their relationship with the Japan distributor, back then Bluebell, which I think is quite famous. And they wanted to open their own shops and control their own distribution. So they needed a lot of people at once. They needed to build an organization. Back then, the president thought, because I came here not really knowing how to speak Japanese or where is the station, but not really understanding the answer. So I could never get to the station. I could ask where it was, but getting there was another story. But some basics. So he said, "Oh my God," and it was a bit of a misunderstanding too, if I can tell the whole story, because it's just crazy. You must have read my resume a bit in diagonal. I graduated from St. Mary's College of California.
Yes.
And as you know, there is a St. Mary's school here.
Oh, yes, there is, yes.
That was a 4-year degree that I had at St. Mary's. Here it's just a high school. But I think he saw St. Mary's. So when I got into the interview,
he imagined you fluent.
You're not from not that St. Mary's. Oh, that explains why your Japanese is horrible. Okay, let's do it in English. And then because they needed so many people and they had a flagship store, that president back then thought, okay, well, let's give him a spot, let's give him a job within the flagship shop. Meanwhile, he's going to learn Japanese. And then a year or so later, we're going to bring him back into the headquarters, and he's going to be in the purchasing division, dealing with French, et cetera, et cetera. So it was a big part of a plan, but I ended up after a 4-year degree, and I had done quite well with honors concentration in finance and whatnot, you know.
Yeah.
But I ended up basically moving headbags on shelves, dusting shelves, cleaning up windows for a little while. Mm-hmm. And I think the anecdote that is really funny is back then I had a friend that had hooked up with the football team, soccer team here, the Swiss Kickers. And one of my predecessor here at Greenwings was walking with his girlfriend. The flagship store was in Harajuku. And he was walking with his girlfriend, and he saw me basically on my knees washing the windows early in the morning. And I think he took pity on me. Or he thought, oh, this guy is a hard worker. I don't know. But I believe this image of me is the reason why much later on, after other job and position, he thought, this guy is okay. Right. he's an authentic old Dutch guy. And, you know, people sometimes they say, okay, he's done the hard work too, you know. He's gone through things. Yeah. And this remains, I think, an anecdote. I think that is kind of funny. So a lot of misunderstanding but
so how long are you there?
I was actually with that company for only a year.
Oh, okay, and so quite short.
Yeah, quite short. And then actually that president, hopefully not because he hired me, but he was replaced. Oh. And things did not go quite as planned. And talk about distribution in Japan. Go and do it yourself is a risky venture, and I think didn't go quite as planned. Heads got chopped up, bonuses were not paid, right? And through relationship, I had a friend contacting me and say, "Look, my dad has a company." I'm like, "What? Your dad has a company? Okay, great." And they're doing that brand from Germany, okay, and they really have a lot of trouble with communication. You know, I think you could really help, and my father would like to meet you. And so I say, well, no. And actually turned him down literally. No, I said I just got in, and I felt really loyal to the company. They gave me a shot in Japan, so I did resist. But then the whole story was a bit collapsing.
It was deteriorating
and
rapidly.
You kind of have, you say, okay, what do I do now? And maybe next time it's me that they're going to fire, and what's going to happen?
Exactly. Yeah.
So I went to dinner. I said, oh, my dad is going to invite us to dinner. Please put on a suit, he says to me. I said, okay, fine. I had to dust off the suit, and now actually I had it. And we went to the restaurant, and it's really the little napkin story. Oh, so the typical, who are you? Where you come from? Oh, you went to school in the US, okay. Oh, and you know my son? Yes, and your son, etc., etc. So typical the relationship. Yep. Okay, how much are you making now? Because we really need somebody. So same story, but remaining very general and broad about the job. Yep. And then napkin. And says, how much are you making? Okay, I'm gonna double it almost. And I'm like, okay, this is good.
This sounds good. Moving in the right direction.
And then I remember saying, this is crazy. And then the end of the dinner came, typical. So the bill has been paid. Yep. Everybody separates. We walk out on the street, and suddenly there's a long, big Cadillac coming. The chauffeur is coming, and the dad gets in the back, and I'm like, your dad has a company? Seriously? I was like, this is a big company. But I had no idea. Yeah. And again, a bit of an opportunity there. And then I worked for them. This company is called Nix, and I worked for them in this department, basically trading. Typical Japanese company who had gone into trading brands from overseas and bringing them, distributing them in Japan. Right. And there I went to become within a very, very Japanese structure, kacho, so in charge of purchasing and really being in that division. The number 2, the number 3 influential young man.
So Kacho's got staff.
Yes.
So this is, here you've barely been in Japan, 2 years by this time?
That's right.
And you've now got staff, and here you are, your first management experience probably ever.
Yes.
And they're Japanese team, and it's all being done in Japanese, I presume.
That's correct.
How did that go?
No, that was, well, I was very young. So when you're young, everything's exciting, you know. And maybe I didn't realizing that all the politics that could have gone behind the scene. I was just really focused back then on my job and delivering. And I had this very special relationship with the leaders because I was their voice to our supplier, and this was an exclusive distributorship agreement. So this was quite important and quite high level. Not super high level, but it was high level in a way, the discussions that were going on. And I was part of it. And of course, that helped me get an insight on how the Japanese were thinking, again, at senior management level. With the colleague below me, I would say it was challenging because
So
language was an issue.
Language,
but
yeah.
of course, things got better.
Yeah.
What helped me is that I was strong in IT, quote unquote, compared to where
Compared
Japan
to
was
them at the time, yeah.
And I was able to build some tools that made life easier for everyone.
Okay.
So they were very impressed by it. And so here goes the trust. Here's not just the foreigner, you know, just writing emails. He's actually also making things better for us. But there were some rivalries and some jealousies, of course, with some of the colleagues and all. But
How about with your staff?
and not untypical from anywhere.
Because
you
in
get
many
a bigger
ways,
structure.
you didn't have a leadership experience. So in a way, you don't have to unlearn anything for Japan. You know, like you come to Japan with a fresh mentality about that and a fresh attitude. So you're just leading people by instinct, I guess.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So how was that? You know, how did you find doing that with a particular, apart from the linguistic, of course, that's a big issue, a big issue. But apart from that, from a pure leadership point of view, because this podcast is focusing on leading, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be listening to this, watching this and thinking, well, I'll be leading a team in Japan. And what am I going to be facing? And it'll be my first time maybe to lead a team anywhere. So what would be some of the characteristics of the challenges that came up from a pure leadership point of view as your first job as kacho, as section head?
Yes,
I shouldn't say
head.
division head, promote you, section head.
So it was not hundreds of people in that division, but I had, say, probably 3 or 4 direct reports. What was, for me, I had already built the connections because again, I grew a bit through the ranks. I didn't become kacho overnight.
Right.
It took me 3 years or 4 years to get there, which was still a bit fast.
Yes, by Japanese standards,
By Japanese standards. So I had built the interpersonal relationship, which I think helped, which really helped a lot. Also, I did get a lot of backup from above me. So that was putting me in a situation where I was very comfortable within that team. So it was not as if I just had come from the outside, got into that division and had to change things. I had already sort of changed things. And that is why they made me
They made you,
the kacho. So I don't recall it as a true very hard leadership experience, because I was not hired to be the manager and say create change, which I would think is one of the hardest things to do in Japan. So it became quite natural. But acquiring trust, putting the hour, being reliable.
Putting in the hours. Were you working a typical 9 to 11 sort of day?
No,
that sort of crazy stuff?
Because I, being French, I had my limits. But you can't just be saying it's 6 o'clock, I go home. No. By putting the hours, I mean being there when it really counts. And yes, always going that extra, maybe a half an hour, you think should I really be here? I could be out with my friends. I could be home with my family. And again, this is easier to do that when you're young. Again, no kids, no family. It's a bit harder. Again, if you are coming from abroad, you have the family, and everybody's an expat, and spending that extra half hour in the office where you think, really, I mean, I'm kind of dead already. I'm not really being productive.
What am I doing
Why am
here?
I doing here?
Yeah.
Now, okay, I think the world has evolved. We're talking something that's 25 years ago. Maybe the world in Japan has also evolved a little bit with regard to over time. But being there in the trenches sometimes when you feel a bit idle is also maybe a must-go-through sort of experience. Now, how long you need to decide for yourself. But your Japanese colleague need to know that you're engaged, that you're involved, and that to some extent business comes first. That it's not, you don't come here and it's just, okay, I'm done, I'm going back home to my family or friends, and I didn't ask if everything was okay, if there was anything, this sort of...
I'm leaving.
Yes. Which
probably
is a big no-no, yes. But I think it is, depending on each company has its own culture, obviously. But
so how long are you there at that company?
I was there for 4 years.
Right, well done.
And then I felt terrible about it. Although I'm extremely loyal, it doesn't sound that way, but I went for an MBA. So I left, I went for an MBA in the US, and they rehired me. I went through interviews again in the US. I had by then a family. My son was born already. Went for a few interviews, but was not super excited. I had my forte in Japan. I had the language skills. I had the cultural experience.
And which at that time, there wouldn't have been that many foreigners who could say that, really.
That's right. You're still talking early 2000s. It's not, there's more, obviously. You're not the full pioneer like probably you have been. But there's still not a whole lot. Now, it's very interesting. It's very different. But so they really wanted to hire me. And they offered me a job as international sales manager for their cellular phone housings, plastic housings, so injection molding plastic division. And I would say that I was sort of the perfect man for the job, although I was not in a management position there, because I was international sales manager of a division that was just built. They had assembly lines. The key customers were Sony Ericsson at the time of the merger for the handsets production. And they had assembly lines in Alsace, French speaking. We had design offices of Sony were both in Lund, Sweden, and Munich, Germany. There goes the English. And then the factories were obviously in Japan, in Hokkaido and in Yamanashi. And basically, I was more of a sales project manager, making sure everything was kind of working. I did not stay long.
No.
It was very interesting also to be projected into the world of this much larger company. Although I had, during my MBA, an experience at JP Morgan in Switzerland in private banking. So the size of these companies are amazing. The resources that you have, and you had so many resources online, training courses. And for me, that had been a big eye-opener. But again, working with Sony and Sony Ericsson, the size of these companies and the things we're doing, were always... I admire that, to be in this sort of an organization, to lead an organization to this site with this number of people is something that I have much respect for. And so it was exciting.
What happens after that then?
Then comes the offer of Greenwings. Totally unexpected. 1 year into the job that I had, and truly... Back then, Greenwings was 10 people, 11 people with a turnover of about $12 million. Things were not going well between the preceding president and the shareholders in the Netherlands. They were not seeing eye to eye anymore. A few things were creating tensions, and he was put on the mission to find the next guy.
He himself had to find his successor.
Yeah, because the other guys were in the Netherlands. Of course, the story goes that they interviewed also somebody through headhunting in the Netherlands and whatnot. And then the predecessor was the gentleman that I mentioned earlier who watched me wash the window.
Oh, the circle comes
back
round.
in Harajuku.
Wow.
So you're basically from that moment, this was probably 1995, 96, and now we're in 2001, 2. And of course, I was with him in the same soccer team. He knew me personally very well.
Right, okay.
But knowing somebody when you have a sports and a weekend and giving him basically the lead into a company that he had built because he was really the first president of Greenwings here.
Right.
You want to pick your guy. So I'm always really...
How long was Greenwings established before you joined?
Only 5 years.
That's pretty good, though. In 5 years, they're up to like 12 million with
That's
10
correct.
people. That's not bad,
No, they built it up on the business that closed before. So before that, there was a company called Sunburst.
Oh, okay.
That the whole group was purchased. They decided they didn't want to do the wholesale of flowers anymore.
Right.
So they were going to shut everything down. So honestly, to start a company like that is just great. He was the boss. And then they basically changed names on the doors, took the hardware. The other big investors didn't want to have to do anything with the flowers. So they picked it up. They changed the name. They had the whole customer database and went on.
Wow.
So here goes your 12 million.
That's why you're doing it. Okay.
Yes,
right.
yes.
Yeah.
So but they had done a good job anyway to penetrate the market already in Japan because sometimes it's difficult to be part of distribution here as a foreign company.
So when you take it over, how many people?
About 10 people.
10 people, right?
Yes.
And so you've had experience already as kacho, so
Yes.
you've been leading, and then you go off and do the MBA and you come
Yes.
back. So what was that like? He'd built the business.
Yeah.
Obviously, they were very loyal to him because he probably recruited them all, I guess.
That's right.
And you turn up.
That's right.
Okay, you're fantastic on the right wing in the soccer field,
Yes.
Very good passing and
Yes.
shooting. But who is this guy and why should we follow him? So how
Yes.
did you find that reaction?
That was hard. That was really hard. This is where you get really projected from the outside into leadership position within a Japanese company where people tend to be quite close overall. And I lost... So the first year I was transitioning, we transitioned for about a year. And it was hard. It was hard also to transition because he was a friend. I could see things that I could do better, but he knew so much more, and he still knows so much more than me about flowers, because he's Dutch and basically started looking at flowers and working with flowers from his childhood,
Right.
But I would say that from the shareholders' perspective, they don't want to keep two higher salaries in the company too long, and they've picked you.
Yes.
So you need to transition.
Yes.
And they were very impatient. And I think we could have gone a little bit longer. But, there are risks. At some moment, you got to jump and you got to do it. So we made that jump, which caused a bit of friction between my friend and I because he wanted to have a little bit more time.
Right.
And, of course, I explained to him that I didn't feel the other guys felt that there was a need for a whole lot more time.
Right.
But of course, the other guys didn't know anything, and they were not here, and this and that.
Exactly,
So you can imagine the story.
Yeah.
But it had to be done.
Right.
So we moved on. And the worst part of it is not one of my first assignment that the shareholders asked me to do was to fire the financial guy.
Oh.
And to replace him because they were very unhappy with him anyway.
So here I am.
So
Hi,
here I am.
everyone.
I joined my
Except
friend.
for you,
Yes.
you can leave now. That's going to
Yes.
be a great start, right?
And he was the older guy. He had been there a bit from the start. Yes, there was some level of incompetence that was true.
Yeah.
But it did not help. It didn't help me get in. I would not recommend that. I think they didn't make it easy for me.
No.
But again, 30-something years old. basically for me the chance of a lifetime to make it as the head of a small company, granted, but at the head of a company with responsibility. And sometimes you just have to do what you've got to do. And I was asked to do so, and I did it. Didn't like it, but I did it. And then we moved on. And I lost quickly two of the key people. Key people in the sales team. Not the key people, but two guys that were gonna be superstars. One that had been headhunting, coming from Coca-Cola, so we had hired him to do sales to supermarkets and home centers. Another guy who was a bit more of a charismatic sort of salesperson, hardworking, engaging very well with the flower wholesale market, very much liked by customers and so forth.
Sounds like two good guys.
Two good guys. But they thought, oh my God, this guy, he knows nothing about flowers. He's coming, he's my boss.
No.
That's not going to work for me. I don't see the future in this company. These guys are nuts. But I was able to build some alliance. One of the guy, by then the sales manager, he decided that he could work with me. Okay. And we hit it on. And here we go, a few years later. And I think it's successful.
If you want to be successful as a leader, do the Leadership Training for Managers course. All companies need people who can both manage and lead. Leading people screams out for real skills in communication, dealing with all different types of people, being excellent at innovation, planning, delegation, handling mistakes, doing performance reviews really well, and inspiring and motivating the team. Do the Leadership Training for Managers course now in either Japanese or English. Yeah, and so you've hit the ground at a fairly difficult entry point and the way that you entered, but gradually you could build that trust. So, in terms of getting the team engaged, they've been doing the business a long time. You don't even know the business.
Yeah.
So they must be looking at you thinking, who's this guy, right?
Right.
So how do you engage them? Or being Japanese, are they just loyal anyway to the company? Or did you do some particular things to get them on board with you, to engage them?
Yes, I think I did. Was I textbook conscious about the things that I did, or was it just, again, a natural thing that I had picked up?
Yeah.
But I knew that I was not gonna be the boss that was gonna tell them what to do commercially for quite some time.
Right.
Was not knowing the product, not knowing the customers. Of course, you can have the textbook learning that I did have in my MBA, and it's not just textbook. I had experience and all that. But you can't be forcing things upon a commercial team when you're new to the industry. And even though you can draw and infer some logic into all sorts of things, I think it's important not to overstep. So I think what I have done well is that I have pushed and asked and did my learning without creating burden on the organization, and also without forcing my own view of things. I've been very patient into planting seeds in a way, and I had the time to do so. Sometimes you can be in a situation where you have to hit the emergency brake and make quick changes. But that was not the case. We were having a business that was rolling, and it was about, again, re-guiding and guiding and creating the culture that I wanted for the future. So not overstepping, not being an extreme burden, but being decisive in sometimes is something that I did.
Culture? You say the culture that you wanted. What was that culture that you wanted? A candid culture where I would say we say things as they are, because that can be very frustrated here. I think some of the questions are about engagements. You can be sitting in a meeting and you literally don't get a whole lot out of it. No.
And you just want to say, fine, let's go back to our desks and do our things because we're not going anywhere.
Now, why is that? You know, this is a business. They're experienced people. You know, they understand how it works. You're in a meeting. You're expecting an outcome from the meeting. There's no particular outcome from the meeting. Why is that?
Sometimes people are not prepared enough. Sometimes it's a bit too ad hoc. I think that you need to have the right and call for the right people around the table. Sometimes you can reach out a little bit too broad. And also when you have multiple level of hierarchy within the same group, obviously on the lower side, people tend to just not say anything because it's not for them to speak. They like to have at the time to discuss, to say the things to their bosses, and then their bosses should know what they said and then pass it on. So you need to take the time for what is called typically the nemawashi, and to go around and make sure.
And did you do that? Did you go around with people before the meeting and sort of get them to talk?
Yes, so that I got better at it. I didn't do it right away, but I realized that
after a few meetings, it's like
this needed to be done.
Got to change this, yeah.
That's right.
And when you started doing the nemawashi, and nemawashi, literally, we call it groundwork in English. That you, in a Western culture, you'll go to the meeting, we'll debate in the meeting, we'll make the decisions in the meeting, and we get on with it. But in a Japanese context, before the meeting, if you want a particular outcome, then you go to the key players and you explain and you discuss and you get their agreement and you change what you're thinking to get them to agree with it. And by the time you get to the meeting, it's basically the decision's already done. It's a formality of agreement at the meeting. So that's quite a different way of running meetings. And you probably started with the beginning thinking, we're going to have a debate, have a discussion, have an outcome in the meeting.
Yes.
Got nothing. Then you had to go around the group beforehand, set it up, and then get the right outcome in the meeting. So that's a quite different style of doing things. But ultimately, you found out how to make it work.
Yes, and ultimately, I think this is a great way to proceed in business. I mean, it can be slow, but you get what you look for, which is a buy-in from most of the players. So the decisions are slow, but then the implementation, you can get your time back on implementation because then it goes fast. Everybody's sort of on board.
They've bought into it.
Yes. So, it's about where do you spend the time? You spend it on finding the wheels at implementation or you find it at the decision-making level. I tend to like the nemawashi. I think it's all right.
And it's not uncommon too, I think, in my experience, that people will, I won't use the word sabotage, but they won't particularly abide by that decision. You come to the meeting, you have the debate, you make the decision. They're not satisfied. They're like, no. And therefore, they either slow down or don't do at all what they're supposed to be doing. And you think everything's humming along. And then at some point in the future, you wind up doing a check of things, you realise it hasn't been done. And then they have a whole bunch of excuses why it wasn't done. But the real reason was they didn't like the way you came to the decision, didn't like the way you took it over, and they just held back their resources, held back their time. So you can pay a penalty, actually, here. Yeah. No one ever says, I'm not going to do it. They just don't do it, though, silently. Yeah.
And I think that one of the learning that takes place, too, is how far do you go with getting the consensus? And this is where probably your experience within the company, within the industry, with the people, the relationship you built over time, the give and take that takes place, allows you sometimes to say, okay, I know, but we've got to move. Let's get on with it. And you can now start pushing and move a little bit faster to the beat of a slightly faster drum. Otherwise, you can just, you can get into absolute running circles. So as the leader at someone, you need also to make that decisions for everybody and say, guys, we've talked, we've done enough, let's move it.
So you have an MBA, you're well educated, you've been in the Western environment, and innovation is very important in any competitive business, and the cut flower business is very, very competitive. So if you don't have engagement, I don't believe you can get innovation, because if you don't care, you don't care. So you've got the people basically gotten used to you. They see, you're not a monster. You actually got your heart in the right place. And they see that you're working well. Okay, the CFO had to go, but they got a new CFO. Life moves on. How do you get people to go beyond the everyday sort of parameters of their work to start thinking, how can we, do better than the competition? How can we have a better client service? How can we be more efficient in our internal methodologies? How can we source new product that was going to be, a new campaign, new launch of something to create a stir in the market? How do you get the team here to do that?
Innovation, I find our organic change, our innovation, anything that new and moves you forward, I think is one of the biggest challenge that we all have. That said, I have turned probably a bit Japanese over time, so I have to look at myself in the mirror and think, do I let innovation happen as much as it could happen?
Do you think so? You think you sort of adopted the Japanese steady she goes approach? Yeah?
No. The steady she goes, no, but let's not take too many risks so as not to inconvenience customers, partners, colleagues. I think there's that as well. It's not just let's go with the flow, sort of, the status quo is good, everything's fine, customers are happy. Our salary's coming every month, bonus still comes, and actually competitors are not really doing a whole lot either.
Right.
Because that's also the reality.
They're doing what you're doing.
Scenario, everybody's doing the same, which is kind of going with it.
Go with the flow,
Yeah. And so I do, I think looking at yourself and how you lead, I think is a big part of it. Are you yourself creating the spirit of innovation? Because a lot of things come at the top. Of course, you can again create. I think there's a selection in the people you do promote over time. In some position, you want to promote some very conservative and a bit people that are going to be pushing the brakes a bit, and then making sure that in other sections, so sales or product development, you've got people that are a little bit willing to think outside of the box and do things differently. And so I had the chance, of course, to see this growth. Sometimes you arrive and departments are there, so the culture is not the culture you've built. But I think you do find people that are innovative in Japan, that are willing to take chances. And whether the rest of the organization likes that or find that really annoying, sometimes you get into that too. So
when you say the rest of the organization here or the organization back at headquarters?
No, the organization in Japan. Which tends to slow down the colleagues.
Are saying, hang on, wait a minute.
You're changing things.
Wait a minute, yeah.
Changing things like, we're going to have to think about this, because the team here, in general, the Japanese are really good at seeing all the problems that can happen. Excellent prediction of future possible problems. Mostly the negative stuff, I have to say.
A high level of innovation on defining a potential risk.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, and again, this is where managers and leaders, there's got to be a clear... a bit top down in really engaging again and pushing for new things and letting everybody know that it's okay and it's okay to fail too.
Well, that's a point, because in Japanese companies, it's not okay to have defects. It's not okay to make mistakes. Absolutely. It's not okay to have errors, and it's not okay to fail. And so the culture from when they're young teaches them that. So getting people to take a risk has the potential of some problem coming up because it's new by definition.
Yeah.
The established procedures are not there. So you're asking people to come out of their comfort zone, and there are chances of errors. And in a Japanese company, that's going to mean it can be a career side, putting it from the side. It could be meant scolding by your superior, yelling in the office at you, calling you an idiot. Plenty of Japanese have had that experience. So how do you deal with mistakes in that situation?
So obviously you can't be coming down on them. I mean, not these ones. Some you want maybe to make it a point, but if you think this is the right thing to do, but in general, I don't think it is. It can be mentioned, you can increase awareness, you can say this is not what we want to do, and we need to reflect here, the typical hansei in Japanese, right? So you need to encourage it and find the learning and communicate. So therefore, truly communication, as you lead in Japan, is important. So your skills on the top, your language skills on the top, or of your cultural insights are very important. So you need to be there and be positive about failure, encourage them. And I think this is all. There's not a whole lot to it beyond that.
Yeah.
So you have to refrain from this.
What about language? I mean, do you think people who are coming here need to speak Japanese? Is that like you learnt Japanese over a long period of time? I have done so too. We can operate in both languages, in your case, multiple languages beyond just English and Japanese, I know. But is that a requirement, do you think? What if they can't speak Japanese and they need to communicate? What happens then?
I think it's driven by by the organization you come in. I mean, I obviously have friends who've been here for nearly the same number of years as I, and their Japanese is awful, and they've been very successful. But they are in multinationals where the recruiting from the start in Japan has been to bring up people who are bilingual. So they work with great teams of bilingual Japanese, English people, and English is the language in the company. So, and they don't have too much of an external position engaging with customers. They don't go too far below where the Japanese is the main language. So they're also doing quite well.
Did you make Japanese or English the language of the company here?
I kept it Japanese.
You kept it Japanese. Okay, why was that?
I think I was very keen on, again, possibly because when I arrived, I felt I had people leaving. Like two people. So I came here a little bit, yes, I'm the boss, but I was not super assertive. And again, I wanted to be there. I wanted to lead. And I was leading, but I was leading in a very, in a very subtle way, really going through the people, and we were not that many, so it was not as if I needed to reach out too far.
Yeah.
So I was not, and I didn't want to slow things down either, and the skills were not there.
I see.
I had only maybe one really fluent person. The other ones were sort of speaking English. So, again, building the organization, saying everybody's going to be bilingual, was not something that, even if I would have wanted that, I probably couldn't have done it.
Right.
Bilingual people that are willing to work in our industry, in the flower business, in the trade, are a dime a dozen, and actually they want to be in business for themselves.
Yes.
Going to Colombia, Kenya, New Zealand, speaking the English and bringing back the flowers.
Yes.
So it was really difficult to say, I offer you a corporate future and a career to people who are bilingual, which were a little bit, these guys were going to the gaishike, the banks, the multinationals, Greenwings, 10 people, how many bilingual talents can I really hold on to?
Right,
so probably would have been a bit unrealistic. I do regret, however, not to have engaged more in English with my subordinates. I think I could have done a better job to build up the language skills over time by putting on the pressure a bit. Maybe.
Well, it's interesting that, Japan really educationally has failed in teaching English at high school and university, pretty much. And the numbers of young Japanese going overseas to study that you met when you were at university in the States has really plummeted. And they're not going overseas anymore. Okay. They're staying here because the food's great, it's safe, everything works fine, no major issues. So the pool of English speakers is actually shrinking. The population is declining. the population of, was it 15 to 34-year-olds has halved in the last 20 years, halved. And in the next 40 years, it's going to halve again. So our general pool of young people is going to be smaller, and those who can actually deal in English are going to be smaller. So I think it's going to become much harder. And I think for many companies, this is going to be a really vicious competition for talent in the future. Well, it's happening now. Okay. COVID has sort of put a hold on this. But once, we get herd immunity in the country and things get back to normal, that war for talent, particularly English speakers, is going to heat right up. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. But let's talk about trust. You talked a little bit about trust before you mentioned it. How do you build trust with your team?
It's the notes you play that make the music. I forgot the saying, but basically there are some things that you really need to do and be aware of in Japan. Mm-hmm. You gotta be on time.
Yep.
You got, and these initial moments are very important because you create your brand. You gotta create your brand, and being reliable. Just like we were saying about being innovative and taking risk, and how even at the top, you don't want to be the one perceived as the one taking the risk for the fear of failure. You need to be the one who makes sure that everything works and nothing fails. So you build your brand, you're reliable. So you got to be sure, you come like me from a culture of in France, where being 15 minutes late, although it's changed now, I'm sure a lot of business people in France would say, you're nuts, now we've got to be on time, But it was okay to be slightly late or this and that. And then you come here and you realize people come here 15 minutes early. So I'm not saying it's what you got to do, but maybe it's safe to do so. So you need to put that in your mind. Don't joke around. This is very important. And this is about respect for the people who are there. There's a lot of ramification to that is seen in being on time, obviously, anywhere else, but here very important. I would say keeping a humble profile is very important to keep some. You don't want to be the one starting to tell everybody what to do. Being arrogant is not something that's going to take you a whole lot of place unless you're major talent. If you're obviously the best at what you do and a world-class renowned professional in something that you can get away with a bit of arrogance, that's all right. But if not, then I think staying humble as to build a relationship, and that's to build the relationship. It's not for the sake of being humble. It's also because people will start talking to you and feel like they can confide into you and that they can get close to you. The moment you're the urusai, people sort of the loud gaijin, the loud foreigner, people don't really want to get too close to you. You're a bit of an embarrassment.
Yeah.
So you don't get invited to these extra little moments outside the office so much. And when people are there, a lot of people keep quiet. But when they start that you're not an embarrassment, that you bring, then doors open. And then, in this moment, you build the trust. You say, okay, it's okay. We can talk about things in a different way. Drop the titles a bit and get closer. And I think that's important to build the trust. You need to have some of that and get the job done. Your word. Don't say you're going to do things if you don't think you're going to do them. This is where you have to be. Don't be innovative. Don't take the chances. It's okay to not say anything here. It's okay to not have an opinion. I think it's okay in many places, but don't start saying things and not that you don't control and you can follow. So again, you build your brand. What you say, you have to do.
There's also the point of be careful what you do say, because the president's word can be law. Yes. And often it happens, people have told me they've regretted, they've made some flippant comment or some light comment, didn't attach any importance to it, and suddenly there's a whole scramble going on in the background of people trying to execute the president's words when the president wasn't thinking that seriously about it. So I think that's something too which we don't take into account.
This is so true, Greg, because and this is why sometimes I think looking at it as foreigners, we come and we say, okay, we're meeting this Japanese boss. and everything feels empty. It's like they didn't say anything, no. And of course, because of meetings, because of the situation, because as you say, when they speak, it's also already law. It's already passing on decisions, and everybody's going to have to follow through. The words are very important. So you end up with leaders that you think they're just talking nonsense and things that are not really. It's more about how is the way, and France, I like France. You spend a whole business meeting talking about a whole lot of things and not a whole lot about the business itself, and definitely not if there's any conflicts or any areas that need a bit more ironing. The ironing is going to have to happen in the back, even for the bosses.
Are you doing business with Japan? Do you really know how things work? Japan Business Mastery provides the answers. Do you have the right networks and know how to create them? Do you know how to get on the same wavelength with Japanese buyers? Do you know what being trustworthy looks like from the Japanese perspective? Japan Business Mastery is based on more than 30 years' experience in Japan and will become your go-to guide. Want to succeed in Japan? Buy Japan Business Mastery now. That's interesting too, because I think as foreigners, we tend to think that presidents have decision-making power, and therefore, if you can get to the president and you get the president to agree, then a whole bunch of good things are going to happen around your selling whatever it is you're selling to the company. Yeah. And as you say, you have these meetings with the president, and it's like a social activity with, don't even discuss business because they've pushed it down. They've pushed it down to the people at the bottom to investigate you, to do the due diligence on you, to go through the pluses and minuses, and can we compensate if something goes wrong, and what does our risk look like, and that stuff bubbles back up to the president, who on the basis of their research then says, okay, let's do it, as opposed to we think we can convert the prez, it's all good, but it actually doesn't work out like that. So I've been in those meetings, and you're often sitting there thinking, in the early days anyway, what the hell is this? I'm trying to talk business, and they're not even talking business, or they're not getting into the nitty-gritty that I want to get into. It's like, huh? So yes, I've been in those meetings too.
Yes.
Yeah. And so do you think things like, are you pre-COVID anyway, were you a big, let's go out and have beers or drinks or dinner or lunches or this sort of thing with the team? Were you building that I'm a human being like you can relate to me as a human being because, I'm not being the president who's up here, can't be related to. I'm like you. Were you doing that type of thing or not much?
No, I have. And again, everybody has a style. But I'm okay with that. And I think everything in balance. Yeah? So you don't want to be doing that all the time.
No.
Because then, anyway, all the time, you're starting to miss the point, I think.
Yep.
But to not engage is also not engage out of the office hours into this, the drinking and the eating, or not setting the time for this more convivial moment. That basically it's a bit of team building. Of course, I think that some larger company have structures and HR departments who have already a set of activities and to build up teams and in cohorts and people, the new guys all coming together at once and so forth. Now, we're now 40-something people. We're still not quite there. So I've always made it a point in creating at least annual events. So we've got 2 annual events. We've got a kickoff party where we look at last year and the numbers, and where we say, what is it that we're going to be doing this year? And I have to say that I was not fully disclosing everything, but I've come now to disclose fully everything when it comes to the financial performance of the company.
Including the profit?
Including the profits.
Right. And what was holding you back from doing that before?
Disclosing profits, you start thinking, well, if first of all, because you make some, when you don't make any, I think it's easy to disclose the profits. So we were relatively profitable, And when you're a small company, the idea of having shareholders in the Netherlands who are not really doing a whole lot, and they're just owners, and of course they can make some money, but then, you know, it's hard not to start thinking that, well, somebody here internally, as they see the results, they might just come and say, well, you know, I don't think this is right, and I want a little more, and I want a little more, and I want a little more. And we're on the low margin trading business. So,
you are.
And again, so I didn't want to get into that. And also, I don't think that the shareholders wanted me to do that. So I refrained from it for quite some time. And as we got bigger, it became easier because the numbers a bit more spread out. And I just decided that the moment you build that, and you know, the first year maybe there's a bit of, wow, we're making money and somebody's making money. But me, I'm not getting really a whole lot richer. I mean, my salary did increase a bit, but not a whole lot. And maybe I want a bigger bonus. But you know, you do it 1 year, do it 2 years and 3 years. And then after that, it all becomes transparent. And this is part of the story. So you get on with it. You know, are you happy with the working condition? Are you happy with your package, remuneration package? And then the rest, well, we make money. And, you know, Apple and all these large companies, they make billions and billions of dollars. And it's publicly known. And they have to run their business that way. So I decided to say, okay, let's be open. And also, I'm very big on being, you talk about building trust. I think this is part of it. This is a part of it, being authentic and being as transparent as can be. And that's very difficult, obviously. You don't always have to say everything to everybody. It can make things a bit tricky at times. But being as authentic, being as transparent as you can be, as you manage, as you lead, I think is quite fundamental to building trust.
So we've talked quite a bit about leadership so far. Are there any things I haven't asked you about leadership which I should have?
About leadership?
Leading in Japan.
Yeah,
leading in Japan. I don't mean leadership as an academic subject.
Do I enjoy it, you know?
Well, looking at you, I'd say the answer is obvious, yeah.
Would have been better off staying in France. No, I think we are... As if we're in a position of leadership here, presidents of companies, some things really can get to us. Again, you know, the silences, what we see as lack of engagement. But actually, when you step out of the meeting room, well, and maybe this is my personal experience, I find that the people here are really engaged, and they're really in the job. And I feel that most time than not, they go the extra mile.
Because you've hired, you say you're now 40, it was 10 when you started,
Yes.
so there's probably, 30 plus. You're recruited, interviewed, hired, selected people, which also makes a big difference when you're inheriting someone else's 10, and now you got, probably of that 40, a big proportion are your people. That's in Japan seems to make a very big difference who hires you and their loyalty to that person who hired them.
Yes, and I would say for as much as you can, large corporations, it's impossible, but you want to be a part of the interview. You want to be there somehow saying, and because this is how you build loyalty. I think if you're part of the decision making and your face has been there at some point during the interview, you create a bond with the person you hire. So, if you can be keen on doing that for some position. I think it's important to sometimes step in and again, be engaged. You want people to be engaged, you cannot just be sitting in an office and looking at reports. Again, for a company like this company, in a large company, maybe it's just unthinkable. It's just everybody would like to, but just the time is not there. So I don't know.
And what about, say, we talked a little bit before about advice for people coming here. We talked about learning Japanese and that type of thing, but what would be some other advice you'd have for people who are going to be sent out to Japan, go to Japan, run the operation there? They don't know Japan. They don't speak Japanese. What would you give to them in terms of advice?
Again, be aware of how important time is. I think the building the trust and building your brand as a reliable piece of the mechanic. You must fit. You must make an effort to fit, at least for some moment. And once you're accepted, if you want to be disruptive, if you want to start pushing things, but you gotta go. You can't skip too many steps. For most, some are able to do anything, and there are all sorts of leaders. But I would not recommend to skip steps. So you need to build that brand. There's got to be at a moment in the organization, you must feel that people look at you and say, the guy is working hard, he's involved, he's engaged, he's part of this team. He's not just a foreigner that is going to be in and that he's going to say, we're going to say goodbye to him in 3 years, and we're just going to have to say hi for 3 years and then
wait till he leaves.
Yes, because anyway they can't live without us. But we know this guy is going anyway.
Yeah.
So I'd say to build perennity, and even I think for firms hiring and bringing people in Japan, they should. I'm sure they do that, but you got to be staying here a little bit more than 3 years. I think 3 years feels very short.
How long do you think?
I think a 5-year assignment.
5 years is a good posting.
Is about right.
I use this metaphor of when you arrive, you're taken straight to this lake, and it's covered in fog, and it's a warm lake, and you're swimming around in the lake, and you can sort of vaguely see shapes, you can hear noise, but you can't see anything very clearly. In the year 2, you start to realise, oh, there's a mountain over there, and oh, there's a tree over there. And year 3, the fog lifts, and then you're ready to move to your next posting.
Yes.
Just as the fog lifts, time to go. Whereas I think if you had that extra couple of years, the fog is lifted, and then you actually understand, okay, now I know what to do. So you get the benefit of that.
And you can make a difference.
Yeah, you can make a big difference now. Yeah, so 3 years, I think you're right, is a bit short. Any other advice for newbies coming to Japan?
Again, politeness and humility, I think, are social skills, not just outside but within the office, that you should have, that you should be aware of to be integrated. In terms of leadership, I think that taking the time to engage with key people, finding your right arm, maybe a couple of them, is a crucial element. And there you also should not run into fast decisions saying, this is my guy. And what I have seen often, and not just in Japan, by the way, for foreigners in Asia, is that it's easy to pick the guy who speaks English the best.
Right.
But it's not always the right. You can be, he's got it all figured out. He can help me. He can speak the language. And he understands, he explains things to me. But the quality of that guy and his insight into his colleagues and into the business is fundamental, because then you start getting a voice. Yeah. But is it a good voice or is it just noise?
And is that advice actually any good? Because, often they're Japanese, they've grown up here, they're educated here, they've been working in the industry a long time, they're older, and often their advice is crap. But you've got to know, actually that's a crap piece of advice, I'm not going to take that. And I realise where this guy's level is. And again, it's also, I think, a reflection of how much, in small companies, how are you prepared to pay? Because, I read this article, I put it on Forbes, about don't go for the A, the A group, hire C's and make them into B's, because that's usually all small companies can afford. You can't afford the A players, A players are very expensive. If you're a big company, like, you said before, fine, but for us, A players are very expensive. So you're not going to be dealing with A players. How do you learn to deal with C players and make them into B? I've always thought is the key, and that's a struggle and not easy, but financially, that's probably the only choice you've got.
Yes.
Yeah, well, it's been fascinating. Thank you very much. So how many years have you been in Japan altogether now?
I think all 24.
24, wow, okay, right.
Two different stages, but the last stage now is over 20, about 20 years.
Yeah, adds up, doesn't it?
Yes.
Well, all the best for coming out of COVID anyway, and hopefully the business like mine will improve.
Yes.
As things get better, we get to herd immunity and we can get back to some sort of normality. But thank you.
Can't wait.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate it.
So, thank you for joining us for this latest episode of Japan's top business interviews.